All right, everybody, welcome to Grablives. Just to start off with our disclaimer, everything we say and do does not reflect the City of Los Angeles Fire Department. And just to also begin with our team member and sponsor, Frontline Behavioral Wellness. Frontline Behavioral Wellness is going to assist firefighters, first responders, police officers, veterans with behavioral health and mental health issues that arise within our line of work. Now, this program is designed to treat anything from PTSD, depression, anxiety, and they have a number of different modalities of which they take an innovative approach towards treating anything and everything that comes up in our line of work. And so with Frontline Behavioral Wellness, their offerings do take insurance. So if you know someone who is in dire need that needs assistance, then reach out to them. The best way to reach out to Frontline Behavioral Wellness is through a phone number that is a 24/7 hotline that is confidential and is geared to assist you when you need help. So that number is going to be 661-877-7241. And this number is direct for first responders. If you are interested in their services as well, you can go to acerahealth.com. Now, Frontline Behavioral Wellness also offers a different number of treatments from therapy, group therapy, to neurofeedback, EMDR. They are wanting to help. So if you're interested, reach out to them. And if you are a first responder, please go to that phone number. Again, it's 661-877-7241. Now, for today's episode, we meet again with Beau Porter. And Beau Porter is a good friend and ally in this march and fight against mental health and behavioral health and understanding what it means. And his own odyssey and journey in discovering what is going on. And Beau has a PowerPoint called Treading Water, and it is an excellent way of understanding a grounded approach towards figuring out what's going on with simple steps. And Beau Porter is a firefighter, paramedic at Station 33 for the City of Los Angeles Fire Department. This guy is awesome, and it was such a great conversation to have with him for this second meeting with us. And I missed our first meeting. I was in Hawaii, and I met him at the peer support group training, and we really hit it off. He's a great person and a great person to lead the way in understanding what's going on in this epidemic that's occurring within our first responders and our firefighters in this line of work. So I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. Stay tuned and enjoy. All right, Beau Porter, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. It's been a wild year for sure.
So since you came on, man, what's been you for, everything you've done on your, skyrocketed, highlighted success in behavioral health?
Yeah, it's been a wild year. Obviously the rocket fuel is definitely this podcast. It's come a long way. I'm still out there doing the PowerPoint, like I talked about last time, and still out there doing stations. There's still people out there that haven't heard it, so that kind of is the gateway most of the time into these stations. A couple of guys at the station have heard it or watched it online, and they're like, "Hey, man, you mind coming out?" And a couple of guys haven't seen it, and so it's been good, still breaking the ice that way. And then a lot of times now, they've either seen that or heard the podcast or a variety of those things, and so they we're reaching out a lot more, which is awesome. And then being named the Peer Support South Bureau lead, which is basically a big title for just saying that in my geographical area, I'm the guy to call. That's opened a lot of doors, and that's only been now probably 3 months of that. And so that's brought a bunch of new challenges and new things to learn and how to handle problems, and then getting solutions, and then basically bringing this whole mental health thing to the forefront as far as job wise, and then policy and everything like that. So that's been super challenging. And then as far as outside the department, had several municipalities reach out to me. I did a Ventura County fire. That was a super cool one. We did it at a brewery of all places. It was pretty funny because the guys from Ventura was like, "Hey man, the only place we can get is a brewery that'll hold these many people in the middle of the week, and you still want to do it?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it, man. I mean, every clinician in the world would tell you no, but I ain't one of those, so let's roll." And it ended up being really cool. It was there was I think, I mean, I didn't get an official count, but I'd say like 30 to 35 people. And it was just a cool environment because it kind of definitely loosened just expectations, because everybody, when they hear, oh man, you're going to give a talk on mental health, great, yeah, let me sleep for 30 minutes. But it was just cool. So it kind of broke the ice right away just by where it was. And so it was just a really cool breakout session afterwards and talking to everybody. It was quite useful. And then because of all of that, the department started using me as to do all the drill towers. So now I'm speaking at every graduating. I usually go the last week of the drill tower, and I go and give my presentation. And so that at first, it was very strange. I remember talking with my wife the first time I did it, and or the first time they asked me, and I was like, man, probationary members. I go, not even on probation, actually not even hit the field yet. I go, where am I going to relate, all of this information to make it applicable for somebody that's never even been on the job yet, really? And so, my wife just, like she always says, just be yourself. And so what was crazy is I, obviously ran through some scenarios of things I could relate to and things that would work. And I remember walking out of the first one after I did it, calling my wife, and she's like, how did it go? And I was like, I don't know. Like, it was rough. And to me, it felt rough. Obviously, it's up to the observer, but for me, it was like super kink, like just hinky, and had a lot of kind of spots where I got to where I'd normally say a story, but then I'm like, well, that doesn't really apply to these guys. And so, but that being said, I actually had some of the best responses to it from those probationary members. And then since going forward, it's really allowed me an opportunity to meet them and introduce myself right off the bat. So before they even hit the field, they all know who I am. They all know, what I do, I guess now. And so now when things do happen, I've gotten a ton of calls, and been able to help out a lot of people through that process now. And so it's cool. It's a good way to get my foot in the door. And so a lot of good has come out of that, kind of risk of sounding like an idiot up in front of a bunch of probationary members. But, cause the last thing I wanted to do is, be up there, some hardcore dude and not be able to relate to them. Cause that's the biggest thing with mental health. And when you're talking to people about it, is being genuine, being relatable. And that's what I always try to do. And so that's why I always change the PowerPoint, not the substance of it, but the delivery of it, depending on the audience. If it's police officers, I change it around to, go towards that. Or if it's probationary members, same type of deal. And just get those relatable stories in there, so they can really start putting two and two together. Because that was my biggest problem when all of this stuff, when I was learning about all this stuff, it was like, okay, that's cool. These are big words. what does it mean to me? Like, how do I apply this to my life? Because, I mean, it sounds cool, but I have no idea what that means. And so just being able to do that for them, to kind of give them a roadmap to the ultimate goal, which is, thriving, having joy in their life and having a good home life. And let's see, I think that's most of it. And then we can get into the peer support stuff as well.
Probationary members, though, I know they've gone a lot to the behavioral health program, and we've reached out because, from what I've heard, because they just feel really stressed out. They're drinking more, and they got 2 babies at home while they're on probation. The relationship really goes downhill, which is normal. And they warn you when you're about to get this job, like, it's a very stressful first year. And after that, it gets, you're put into this game of, juggling that family life, which is a very hard thing to do. But I know without a doubt, like, some of these members as well, like, that they get hired and they have their first time walking to a firehouse is their first day of probation, which is insane.
Yes.
Because they really have no idea what they've got themselves into. Yeah. And so a lot of people will quit, and because they can't handle 24-hour shifts, which is what we do. Mm-hmm. And that can really put a lot on people's shoulders, especially when they're juggling, hey, what's more important? Is my family more important, or is this job more important? And you have to come to a greater realization with that, with understanding, okay, well, you have to meet in the middle, really. Your family has to adjust. That's why this job is probably one of the most, I guess, challenging jobs for a family, because you have to balance between, you're not even at home. And luckily now these days we can, like, FaceTime, your wife and your kids, or your spouse and your kids, while you're off, working 3, 4, 5, 6 days in a row. So I know for myself, when I was on probation, it was one of the hardest years of my life. And I've done a lot of, difficult, arduous things in my life, but that's when I was drinking more. That's when I had less sleep, because I had to study on top of recovering from no sleep.
Right.
So it is challenging, but I think it's important that they chose you to go there and to speak to them and just to relate to them. I guess, it's hard to relate to them because they really don't even have an idea sometimes,
right,
of what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah.
So,
and obviously you don't want to go there and, scare the shit out of them. Right. Like, right. If you pull the whole wool back and be like, yeah, this is what you got, but really it's about, setting up that foundation to where, and not to get too deep into, like, generational stuff. But like we were talking about before we went on, but it's, this has really led me to really dive into, the generational learning and what that's created with the psyche of the new generation, and how difficult it's made, that transition from their growing up to being a part of this team. And so the first thing I want to say is the fact that I do not, I'm not one of those guys that prescribes to, nobody will ever be as good as the generation before that. We're hiring all the wrong people, like all that stuff. Like, for me, that's way above my pay grade. I don't, my thing is to get the best out of what we have. And so that being said, you have to take someone that has since birth really been shown that they're a victim, that they're on their own, nobody cares about them. And even if they came from good upbringing and all of that stuff, that same messaging is every day on their phone all day long. And so the issue with that, when you now enter a high stress environment, and then what I talk about is emotionally supportive relationships, right? And so a lot of these people don't have a tribe, right? And that's what it takes to do this job effectively for a long period, is a tribe that you have those emotionally supportive people that you can rely on, whether that's, your family obviously is the number one, but the problem is their relatability to your job only goes so far, right? You're not, I don't recommend going home and telling your significant other about every call you went on yesterday, for them to help them understand, right? I don't recommend that. And that's just my personal belief, simply for the fact that it's not conducive to a relationship, because your wife is, or your significant other is part of the journey, but they don't need to take that all on. And that's just, in my experience. But that being said, the problem is, or one of the biggest problems I see is over the course of really COVID, is this tribe mentality and this quote unquote brotherhood, has really fallen by the wayside, and it's really basically been put on steroids simply by the younger members, because they're not used to emotionally supportive relationships anyways. Everything that they have a relationship with is on their phone, right? Or on the, internet, social media, what have you. And so, not to mention some policy changes as far as not being able to stay later at work. I hate to say this, but back when I was a probationary member, I used to stay till noon at the station, and it wasn't because I was forced to. It wasn't because that I had to, or the guys would get pissed at me or see me in a negative light. It was the fact that I knew how much I needed to know, and I knew that the best place to learn that stuff was right there. And so I would work with the other probationary member on the other shift, and we would talk, and we would go over drills and all this stuff. And you start to form this community that you had to help you along the journey. And you built all that foundation when you're a probationary member. And then where you fast forward to now, and really, like I said, is post-COVID, because during COVID, in the COVID classes, they weren't allowed to hang out with their classmates. They weren't allowed to, or not really, they weren't allowed to, but they were, discouraged from contacting their classmates, and, because everybody had a lot of stuff going on. And so what happened is you have this big slew of people that were hired post-COVID, and that part of it has kind of been taken away. And so, like, even at relief time, where they get 5 minutes in the parking lot to do a couple whispers about, that we're low on towels or whatever, and then they get in their car and bail because they have to be out there by 6:30. And so that whole kind of teamwork kind of thing gets taken away. And so what happens is, when something does happen, they have no one to call. They don't know who to call. And so a lot of times what happens is rather than talking to the fellow firefighters or talking to their classmates, they go right into the captain, and they go, hey, this is going on. And then the captain's the mandatory reporter, and then on we go down the road, and they're off duty, and they're like, off duty stress, and they're like, what just happened? I didn't ask for any of this, and then it just kind of steamrolls from there. And so my thing, that I'm really preaching now, and when I go to the drill towers, kind of my messaging is the fact that when they get on the job, and this goes for anyone really, but when you get on the job, you're kind of innate responsibility that's bestowed upon you is the fact that you'd be willing to die for the person next to you, right? Like if you go down in a fire, without question, if you go down a fire, I'm going in there, and I will lay down my life for you. And that's pretty much across the board, universal, known fact, right? Which should be 100% true. And if it's not true to you, then you should look for a different line of work. But that's pretty much the inherent risk that you take on. Well, my thing is if you're willing to die for the person next to you, how about you start living for them as well? And what I mean by that is when you say, because obviously the coffee table, or the kitchen table at the station is notorious for, every news of the day, right? But when you have those fires that you're critiquing, or you're going over the fire from last shift, or whatever the case may be, and you're like, oh man, that guy's probably pretty jacked up. And then you just leave it at that. It's like, well, did you call him? Right? Or like the guys that I hear complain about, oh man, that guy's been off for a long time. Like, I wonder what's going on with that guy. And it's like, well, did you call him? Like, no. And so that's my kind of really paradigm shift that I want to start kind of working into, and being able to talk to the probationary members. I can start, from the ground up and really start instilling that of, if you're worried about your buddy or your classmate, or you haven't talked to him in a while, then text him. It takes 5 seconds. You can do it on the shitter. Like it's really not that big of a deal, but it is. It's huge. And so when you start doing that and you start opening up that dialogue, and it may not even be somebody that you necessarily got along with in the drill tower, right? Or at the place you used to work, but it's about that humanization, right? And really bringing back the human aspect of what we do, because what we do is if you want to take it from a clinician standpoint, it's more stress than anybody else will see, and you see 7 times more things in a single year than most people see in their lifetime, and like all of those things, yes, all true, right? But there is a way to successfully and productively do this job for a long period of time if you have these systems in place. And that's the thing is it's like, it's no longer acceptable to be the old retired guy with 3 ex-wives and the kids that won't talk to you. That's no longer acceptable. We know that that's what happens, and for so long that was acceptable to be, and then that's just like, oh man, yeah, that guy was a first responder for a long time, he's all jacked up. And it's like, no, not anymore. We have too much science, too much research that shows what exactly causes that, and so let's start doing something about it. And if we can start doing something about it from the beginning and start laying down that foundation to where we have that ability to be self-aware, to be group aware, and to really reach out and just be humans. And when somebody is going through a hard time, be supportive. And supportive isn't, I'm not asking everybody to go out there and do fundraisers for people, right? If they want to, then great, that's awesome. Do it. Take that risk. But all I'm asking is just to help support each other and stop having such a negative reaction to people choosing themselves over the department. And that's always been caught in a negative light. I mean, definitely throughout my career, through my father's career, it was definitely, the norm, right? Like the minute you choose, not to work that overtime day or not to come into even your own shift, then it's seen in a negative light. But then what I'm asking, and I'm not talking about, administration, because they're always going to be the bean counters and want day-to-day life to go through, and I get that. And like I said, I'm a tried and true, proud, LA fireman, and I would, work as many days as I need to work and all that stuff. But at the same time, having that self-awareness to be able to say no, right? Like, yeah, I can't work that day, and being able to be supported by my coworkers is huge. And that's one thing that I've seen lacking more than anything, is that we've done the experiment now, right? Like we had the brotherhood break up during COVID, and everybody go their separate ways, and now we're starting to see the fallout of what that creates, and it doesn't work. So let's start getting back to, and even further than we used to be, being involved with each other's lives. And what I mean by that is, not noisy Nancy or, gossip queen of, finding out stuff and then spreading it everywhere else. It's about the humanization of bringing back, supporting each other and supporting, each other's lives, and really being each other's best, biggest fans.
Yeah, dude, I think a lot of what you're saying is you got to hit everyone with the truth and honesty, without a doubt. And that goes with telling a probationary member, hey, like, this is a hard job, so you better strap in and figure it out, because it is not for everyone. And if it's going to involve you having to tell your family and sit them down and explain that to them, you need to do it, because that honesty is super vital for you starting off this career. And it's going to continue the more you get in 10, 20 years, 30 years until you retire, however you want to play it out. But I think, even through my own upheavals and the things I've gone through, I had to be honest with myself more than anything. And that was a huge shift in my life when I started to ask myself questions, truthful questions, to get truthful answers. And when I would go through, okay, well, what is the questions I need to ask? Well, I'll ask myself, how do I feel? Okay, number one. How can I adapt to the situation? Certain questions require certain answers. So if you ask yourself those questions, you can get the right answers and you get the truth, really. And I really think if everyone walked in their own truth, you would cut anxiety and depression in half. Because if people are living in their truth, walking through the grocery stores, they wouldn't live in anxiety. And it takes a bit more of that inner work and that inner self-reflection to discover that and to admire yourself more. And through this career, people stop asking themselves questions or have that lack of self-reflection. So people who do struggle later down the road, especially when they've gone through what has been referred to a career of small paper cuts, not necessarily one crazy incident that has ruined your career. Not everyone goes through that, but it's a series of small little incidences that you've had to live through, and you stuffed them back in your subconscious, and you failed to ask yourself questions. Hey, how do I feel about that call? Mm-hmm. How do I feel about not having any sleep the last 6 days? You still have to assess yourself and learn when to say no to those extra overtime days because you want to buy a boat.
Right.
So, exactly. It just really takes a bit of pause with yourself to really ask yourself what you need. And you're right. There's so much science out there and ways to enhance yourself with biohacking or however you want to do it. So I think right now, we're re-understanding what the truth is. And the truth is, we are a tribal people. Yes. As human beings. We're raised that way with family. And when you are in an environment when half your life or a third of your life is with some type of tribe and you're ostracized or whatever, you're going to really struggle. Mm-hmm. And, this whole thing with the lockdown has done that to humanity, not just our job. Right. But we serve humanity in the communities we serve. So we have to really anchor in with this tribal aspect. And even when I make an attempt to get guys from the station over my house for a barbecue, it's really tough to do. Mm-hmm. But everyone's got to make excuses. Okay, I can't do it that day. I got a sod day or an overtime day, whatever. It is hard, but I know for a fact that is one of the pieces that's going to glue behavioral health together, is that tribal mentality of bringing it back. Because let's say 30 years ago, it was way different, where guys would just want to be with people from work and bring their families and let everyone get to know each other. And then that would even more so glue the spouses together. And it was this beautiful thing that's been lost. Right.
Well, and one thing that you really bring up, that's been one of the biggest hurdles for me, talking with the higher ups about policy and stuff like that, is the relatability or the relativity to an event, right? So you talked about the 1,000 cuts over your career, but the big thing is you talk about 30 years ago, and a lot of those people had military background. And so relatively, the job wasn't that big of a deal, right? And they'd been able to draw from how they had their, group in the military, and they fed off that, and it was kind of the lifestyle of how it worked. And then also there wasn't a lot of opportunity to be fake, right? So it brings kind of all the points you just covered. So you talk about truth. Well, the biggest liar you carry around in your pocket every day, right? And so there's a lot of people that live in lies, and this false, narrative of, the grass is always greener on the other side and all that stuff. And so that's the biggest thing that you have to get away from is drawing on emotionally supportive relationships that actually matter, that are real. And so that's the first way that you battle that falsehood and getting back to the truth that you talked about. And really, for me, one of the things has been the being able to understand someone about how they have no way to understand what's happened to them in a specific event, or an incident that they went on, because what's no big deal to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to them. And I relate it right to, being a dad and having kids, and my daughter falls and scrapes her knee. And to me, being a firefighter, seeing way worse every day, it's not that big of a deal, right? Like, yeah, you get up, you're fine, right? You scraped your knee, right? But to my daughter, it's the worst thing that's ever happened to her, right? Oh my gosh, there's blood coming out of my knee. My skin is broken. Like, oh my gosh, like this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And being able to be compassionate towards her, obviously it's my daughter, was a learned skill. I mean, I like I said, we get so battered with work and what we see every day. And so it's hard to relate to that, right? And be able to be compassionate, and be real, right? And so that was obviously something I had to work on, and still I'm working on. I'm work in progress. But in the same, different sides of the same coin, now go back to our job, and now we have people that didn't come from a background in service or fire service or any service for that matter, and they got onto the job because they wanted to do something bigger with themselves, or for the greater good, or be part of a team that's bigger than them, and all the promotional videos, which it's awesome, right? But at the same time, the first time that they go to a fire or the car accident or whatever it may be, the thing is they've never seen anything like that in their entire life. Okay. And this is a problem that I've had with a lot of higher ups, is being able to relate that to them, that these aren't the kids that are out building dirt jumps in their backyard with a shovel and watching their buddies get broken collarbones and facial reconstruction from missing the double and all that stuff growing up, right? They are not those children. So relatively, they have zero experience in any of this stuff. And you can blame recruitment, you can blame all these things, but like I said, I stay out of those wheelhouses because it ain't me, and I don't want it to be me. But what I'm saying is now they're here, okay? And if that is an issue, then we need to address it. And that's kind of what we're working on right now through peer support, is really getting these people the help that they need to have a successful career, because they've already done all this work. They've gone through the process and background checks and drill tower and all this stuff. They've made it to the field, and now I feel that if we're really gonna throw them out there, then we need to prepare them, and we need to give them some armor, for lack of a better term, but give them some armor to deal with it and to deal with it successfully. And so you get a better employee, a better person, a happier person, and they can have a successful long career. And so that's really kind of the issue of the day for me, is spreading that message that it's not what it used to be, as far as the relatability for these younger members when these things happen, because everybody attributes the big incidents where somebody passes away, or line of duty death, or a significant incident at a fire or whatever, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that to impact these people. And the knee-jerk reaction from management is the fact that, like, people are taking advantage of this and all that stuff, and yes, of course, there's some of that is true, right? But you got to let people lay in the bed that they make, right? And it's, you can say the same thing for back injuries, no offense, but you can say things for all those injuries, per people that get Christmas meniscus every year, and they go off December because their knees hurting and all that stuff, that they take advantage of the system. That's fine. It is what it is. But what my thing is don't ruin the system for those rare occasions that people do take advantage of it, when we have people out there hurting, and really start to bring these people along to where they have the tools and the numbers and all these things to get them on track, so they can have a successful career. they can have, you know, a successful life and home life. And so that's really been kind of, you know, over the last couple months, kind of stuff that's been thrown on my, you know, quote unquote desk, is that aspect and getting that messaging out there. Because it's a huge issue. And I think it's, you know, something that needs to be done sooner than later.
For sure, man. Well said. No, I think for myself, like, you know, none of the calls, I mean, I would say none of the calls, but some of the calls I've been on, like, that were so, you know, crazy or whatever, traumatic, you know, a lot of that stuff never affected me personally. You know, I know myself, and I just know I have a job and a duty to do. And those are the incidences where I want to be involved, because I know I'm putting myself in a position to do the best I can do. And I feel good in that moment. You know, it's like acting within this reaction of something that's happening that's crazy, quote unquote, right? Mm-hmm. But for me, it was a lot of my own childhood stuff I had to face that was later down the road I had to look at. That was the stuff for me personally that caused me harm, that I was carrying wounds into the job. So to you know, truth is relative, you know, how we see it, you know, like you're saying, like it may not bother what may bother one person may not bother another person. And however, if you're going to work through your life, you have to discover what that is for you and pay attention to it and focus on that. And I know one of the only things on the job that affected me was working with a captain who disrespected me. And that was one of the hardest things, because normally if it was not a supervisor, I would talk shit back, right. You know, exactly. And instead I had to eat it, which was hard for me. So there was like this fine line of being disrespected and not having to come back with a response and just eating the shit stick, as they say. So that, I think that was one of the only things on the job that bothered me, mentally, emotionally. And I had to look at that and to see, ultimately the way I view my life is everything is a mirror. So everything is reflecting back to me how I feel internally. So that was something I had to look at as well. Okay, so in the end, I was not really showing myself respect. And so that was something I had to kind of unravel, I guess. You know, it's like when you pull the string of something, it's going to unravel the rest. And a lot of times that's like really painful sometimes, because I mean, I don't know if you'll ever listen to Weezer, but like the Sweater song, it's like exactly. Pull the string as I walk away, I lay down naked. It's like being naked and vulnerable is really hard. But in the end, you know, if like I had said earlier, like you live in your truth, man, and you know, you're doing more than that. You're doing, all right, let's look at this entirety of this thing as an entire whole, with how do we assess everyone, and how do we give them the truth, and on top of that, help them adjust to this environment at the same time. And then also you have members who are just they will take so much pain until like something, an illness or a serious incident really hurt them, until they ask for help, which is where we're trying to find, especially as a peer support team member, you're trying to get people to, you know, ask for help before they get to that point. And that's one of the hardest things for us in our line of work is, okay, well, that's why we got to ask ourselves and be honest with ourselves about, before we get to that point, what's going on? Am I drinking too much? You know, am I working too much where I'm not even at home, to where my kids don't even know me anymore? Right. So these are the really important points where we're kind of headed. And it's like, I mean, doing the peer support group training was really eye-opening to see, like, you know, because there's a lot more compassion in the way you talk to people, and you're ultimately just listening to people, which in the end, I think people just want to be heard, man. They want to just be heard, you know, whatever's going on in their life, and they want to express. But for us, I think a lot of times we don't even want to speak of what's happening inside, because we're afraid of what people are going to think, you know, especially if someone has a lot of time on, you know, 20, 30 years. There's a lot of shame in speaking out about how they truly feel, because it seems weak or small. That's not true. And I think we're exploding out of that paradigm, because for someone like yourself to say, you know what, I think there's something going on, you know, I'm at this point where I have like a ringing in my ear and I can't even hear anymore. So it's like it took you to that point to where you had to say there's something going on. And it took you down this path now that's now led you on this journey of helping others, you know? So I think the biggest message is take that inner inventory with yourself to see what's going on. And I think that starts with like journaling, you know, certain practices that really help, and giving yourself a bit more compassion. And because you're not this big, strong person in this career that can just do it all. And when you take a glimpse at that and you give yourself a bit more of that compassion, you can see more. And it's going to show in your relationships. It's going to show in your career. It's going to show in your friendships. And that really shows a lot to where people will start seeing a difference and say, hey, what's going on? You have friends and family asking you. You're like, hey, I'm just journaling. You know, I'm just really taking a bit more of a magnifying glass to, I guess, my integrity. You know, and that shows a lot. And even having your daughter, you know, become one of your greatest teachers to show you compassion is beautiful. Because, you know, that's a huge thing. You don't want to have your daughter now take on what you've brought home from work. It's like it's a big deal. And I know I've done that at my own home, where I have to sit with my girlfriend's daughter, and she's 9, and she's super just emotional. And it's taught me so much about myself. And, you know, I just have to bring a bit more compassion to that as well. And it's like, she's my greatest teacher. You know, she shows me how to be more imaginative than just being so logical all the time. Right. But in the end, dude, you know, we have to come back to our humanization, how you were expressing. Like, let's go back to the root of all this is like family, you know, and the biggest thing is unifying that. And coming from you, dude, I know being at a station in an area you've been in, and I know we wanted to talk about this before, but, you know, being in South LA for 20 years, that's gnarly, dude. Like, I've worked in like South LA for a little bit amount of time, and that was the first time I had reached my burnout, because the call volume is so, it's too much, you know, to where, you know, you're not sleeping. And you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing, you know, and in this line of work, you're pulling out every single drug, every single medicine, every single IV you need to do, every single tool off the truck or the engine to do this job. But for 20 years, man, you know, that really weighs on you. But I really want to give you a high amount of respect and honor for that, because that's not a lot of people do it, you know.
Oh, well, I wouldn't recommend it, obviously. I mean, I made the best of it for the opportunity that I got, but it did drive me off the edge, you know, and not that it was what caused it or anything like that, but it was definitely a piece of that. But that's the thing, is I love, and I try to say it every time that it starts going down a negative path, because it's so easy to go down, you know, all the things that are wrong, is that I truly love this job of what I do day in and day out, and I love doing the job, and so that's the one thing that it's one thing that you know, a busy area provides, is the fact that you get challenged every day. Every day you're challenged of to have, you know, to really, like I always say, is, you know, chase that perfection, and constantly be around people that want to, you know, be busy, because there's no hiding from it, and so you get into that mindset of trying to chase perfection all the time, and then being around high energy individuals that are doing the same thing you're doing, and you're playing off each other, and you're working around you know, great people, and you hold each other accountable, but then at the end of the day, having that level of busyness and craziness, when you're in a team environment doing that, I mean, it's like winning the Super Bowl, since we just passed that. I mean, it really is. Like, it's truly, you know, and we've had people come through over the years that were ex-military, you know, and that's what they would tell me after they promoted out. They would say, you know, this is the closest knit family I have, second to my own. And that's really what that looks like. And I try to, you know, cherish it and really build it up because one, it's necessary to do what we do day in and day out at a busy level with no sleep and all that stuff, because all that no sleep does is it adds one more stressor on how good your game is. Because, most people can think clearly and, think through problems at 2 p.m. But when it's, 2, 3 in the morning, it's got to be automatic. And the only way that you make it automatic is by practicing thousands of times. And so that's the chase that I truly love. And having been there in the same rank, I've been there for almost 19 years. Collectively, I was there as a firefighter for 5 years, and then went to medic school about almost 14 years ago. And I've been there ever since. But playing that role there, and people are like, "Oh man, you should promote. You could do so much more." I say no, and not that, I wouldn't mind the money or the retirement or anything like that, but it's the role that I play, there, and even here. And in this sense, if you want to talk about journeys, could I have been as relatable as I am now in this space that I'm in if I would have promoted early? No, right? And so it's all for something, and I truly believe that. And so my thing is I love training. I love teaching people. I get no greater joy than the day that the light clicks on for whatever they're trying to accomplish, whether it's, a certification or, a promotion, or just a simple task that they'd been working up to. And to see that light really come on, or that go to that first fire or that first incident that we'd been drilling on, and have all of the pieces fall into place, and really see that light bulb come on, and they go, oh, that's what it looks like. That's where I find true joy in the job. And so, as long as people show up and they want to learn and they want to, be great at this job, then I'll be there to teach them. And I truly, there's a great group of people around that place. And it's an honor to work there. And, it's just an honor to be a part of so many people's journeys through the fire service, and being able to kind of set their foundation up at that station, because it's you talk about the busyness and the craziness. It's really where you can really hone your skills simply for the amount of times you do it a day.
Yeah, there's a specific tradition at the firehouse you're at for sure. I mean, Fire Station 33 is known to be what they call Fire City, right? And it has a specific, I guess, traditional way they live their life. I've only worked there a couple of times. And just to be in that area as well, to stick to those traditional ways of living, it's very specific, So I don't know so why do they even call it Fire City?
Well, the official story is back in the 70s. The station opened in 1971, but back in the 70s, they were basically doing a press conference at the station, and they'd gotten the stats for that station, because they were basically promoting the new station or whatever, and the new stats had made it to what they would call the chief engineer at the time, which is the fire chief now. And basically it became Fire City because they had a banner out front, because it had the highest number of fires in the city at that time. And then it was basically deemed Fire City, and it's been ever since, even though, through the years, the administration has kind of nixed the names and all that stuff, and then they kind of go away and they come back. But it's always been there for the 20 so years that I've been there, and it's a sense of pride. All the stigmas aside, and if anybody's ever been assigned there and had a bad time, I'm sorry, and I really truly am. And what I mean by that is the fact that it's the opportunity to do your job and do it well. And obviously I've learned a ton over the years of how how to both professionally and competently teach people. And I've made mistakes over the years on how I did that. And that's one thing that through this journey of mental health and having kids and a successful marriage has really taught me a lot in how to teach people and how to come alongside them and make it the best learning environment I could. I can't speak to in the past because it was definitely a lot different even when I first got there. But that being said, the biggest thing is to surround yourself with like-minded people. So wherever you're at in the job, whatever rank or whatever you see yourself in 5 years, surround yourself around people that not only challenge you every day to be better, and that doesn't necessarily have to be, on the fire ground or anything like that. I hope so. But what I mean is to hold yourself accountable to being a good person. And I'm not getting religious here. What I mean by that is ultimately to the patients. And I'm not, once again, I'm not being a cheerleader for this city, but what I'm saying is take your job seriously. And whether that be with the fire ground aspect or with the patient. And for me, the one thing, and you asked me how I've worked there so long and so busy and so crazy, is because I treat every patient the same, right? With the same level of respect. And I know people talk about that all the time, like, oh yeah, you treat them like your family members. But I really hold that true. And my thing is anybody who's ever worked around me, is no matter if it's 3 a.m. or 3 p.m, I treat people the exact same. I give them the same level of care. And it doesn't matter to me, what your social status is or where you live or how you live, is I take every patient as an opportunity to use my skills. And so, and I get it. Guys get burnt out and they get, frustrated and all that stuff for the, 4th time going to the same address or whatever. And that all being said, it's things that are out of your control, right? Thing that is in your control is if you're feeling burnt out, then it's time for a change, right? It's time for a change, whether that's, job title, place at your, the station that you're at, amount of work that you're doing, right? Or amount of overtime days you're working. But something needs to change, because that should be something that you regard, because if the original reason you got on this job was to be, do something good for society, and you feel that that's slipping away, then it's time for a change for yourself. To bring back that purpose-driven life, because what you'll find is the people that treat patients poorly, or have bad bedside manner, or treat their coworkers poorly, it evidently comes back to that person's personal journey and where they're at in life. And it's almost 100% as far as the examples I can do in my head of people I've met over the years. And it's really part of that self-awareness, that if you feel yourself like that, it's time for a change. Whether that be in the way that you're handling your stress, whether that be with your station life, your home life, or a combination of all those things, and really challenge yourself to do it. Just like we've talked about already, like there's so much information out there, and there's so many opportunities to do things, and there's no excuse anymore to not be really finding joy, like I talked about in the first podcast, finding joy at home and at work. There really isn't, because there's so many different things that you can do to facilitate that.
Yeah, man. And even just to paint a picture of South LA, I mean, it is one of the most financial struggling people in this nation. And when I first started working there, luckily I worked with another black man who grew up in that area. So he taught me all about South LA. And so it was a really cool experience. And we're still like really good friends to this day. And he really showed me, like, he had to do so much just to get out of that area and to do something. And working through the area really brought a lot of limelight to the situation going on, as far as these people are just surviving. And it is very interesting to watch. And most of these people, especially their children, they will keep living in the same cycle because they don't know how to get out. And it's really interesting as far as like an anthropologic perspective. And I view this stuff all the time when I'm working. You know, I just...
Can I use the restroom real quick?
Oh, yeah, for sure, man.
I know this is a pain for your
You're
editing.
good, dude.
I was like, I really want to listen to this, but I'm going to pee my pants.
You're good, man.
All right, hold on one sec.
So, yeah, like I was saying...
Anyways.
And just more so, like I say all this stuff with highest respect for the people who grew up in there in the South LA, because I'm Hispanic myself, and most of the people who work in South LA are Hispanic and African American. So I would say without a doubt, that's the population that we're working with in South LA. And it's highly populated. On top of that, people are living on top of each other. And it's such an interesting way to live when you're just living to survive. And I know the way I grew up, I lived to survive. My family worked 2 full-time jobs just to help me, get out of the slums as well. And it was a lot to witness, and it was a high amount of respect for me to escape my own family's struggles to do a job like this. So I see this job as being a firefighter, as being a paramedic, as an honor, because my family knows how hard they worked to get me out of a place they were in, from my family not even graduating college. So highest amount of respect to the people who do go through this lifestyle of surviving and then escaping the ability to survive, to being able to pay your bills, to being able to pay for your groceries. It's hard, and being able to escape survival is really beautiful. But by the same token, I think by working in a place like South LA, where survival is the number one thing people do, and it's really hard to watch when they don't understand health, and they're constantly in this cycle of trying to find out what to do. My man.
For like $1 million. Oh.
Dude, it's the worst thing, man, when you gotta take a piss during a podcast. You're just hurting, man.
Concentrate, dude. You're like, yeah, I really care.
Yeah, but dude, South LA again, man, is like, it's an interesting, if you look at it from that point, I was seeing it like that, and I just remember being in a house taking care of a super nice old lady, right? But in the room, everyone is dressed in red. And so I was like asking my partner, like, hey, what's going on? He's like, oh, this is Piru Street. So you're in the blood neighborhood. So I got, education on, like gangs, and in specific areas of the city, there are maps that shows you where each gang is from, which is pretty interesting. And I thought it was crazy, to be in, when you hear rap songs or whatever, them talking about this, but I was in these environments, and it wasn't a joke. It was not a joke at all. Then you have to be super respectful. There's something about these people own this town. You know what I mean? They have a pride for it, and these neighborhoods as well. But something about South LA is like something he taught me as well, is that African Americans are genetically inclined to have hypertension and diabetes. So when he told me that, he's like, I'm super careful about the food I feed my children and stuff, because we are, genetically inclined for this. And I never knew that. And most of the calls in that area are diabetes and hypertension. And you look around the area and you're trying to see, like, okay, well, what are we feeding these people? There's Jack in the Box on every single corner. And they don't even have, like, maybe one grocery food store to shop from. And it's probably Food for Less, which is probably the most disgusting grocery store you got to shop at. But dude, that to me was a huge moment where I realized like, wow, these people are so sick, and they're genetically inclined to be even more sick. And how do they get out of this? And just hearing from him, the way he taught me, is that he said it's a trap. It's a trap. And to get out of this trap is really hard. And I just had so much, respect for him, because he was able to escape it, by having a job like this that he could now provide for his family or to pay for bills and not have to worry about that stuff, living in survival. And I thought that was really beautiful. That was my beginning of my career that led me into, seeing things from a different perspectives. And it's a cool thing to have people from different cultures that work with you as well, that teach you this stuff, which is one of my favorite things about this job, is that you learn so much. And from usually not from, from my phone, or it's just personal relationships, which I cherish the most. But one of the things that really got to me was I was working in South LA, and there was like a call I went on, and this woman was, she was just in diabetic ketogenic shock, right? And she had 2 babies on the floor that were toddlers, and she was out for I don't know how long. And these kids were laying there in like this really beat down apartment. And I just remember being on that call, and it made me really sick to my stomach. And I'll never forget that moment. I was just thinking like, this is what people grow up in. I will never forget that moment, man. And I was younger, to see that. And I just know growing up, my parents didn't have much either. And I just really honor people who just get out of it, cause it's really tough. And especially when we take things for granted, I think. And without a doubt, it just brings a lot into perspective, especially in that area. But I guess the entirety of LA too. I mean, the area I work in now is really poor. And it's just funny to see also the cultures that are in different pockets of the city that you're working in. Because I think it's just, it changes and it shifts without a doubt. I don't know. What do you think, man?
No, it's you brought up a lot of good points. First off, you talk about the respect thing, and that's one thing that I learned early on down there, is how important respect is, and how that's when you have nothing. Respect is all that you have left, and that's something that I learned early on in the job, being down there young. I learned that pretty much right away, because every time a call would go sideways, it was because somebody disrespected somebody else. Mm-hmm. And so, you basically create or begin to kind of survive by, as long as you treat me with respect, I'm going to treat you with respect. And there's that mutual respect. And really there's a lot of successful outcomes from that, on a patient level, on a family member level, that you see on a regular, EMS call, that as long as you keep it on the level, regardless of what's going on, right? Regardless of whether it's a drug deal gone bad, whether it's an incident of, that you don't necessarily, like, like I'm talking about like a pimp beating up one of his prostitutes or whatever, like that's all stuff that we deal with on a daily basis there, and it's real, right? But as long as you have a mutual respect for that patient and what they do, not looking down on anybody, because that's one thing that'll get me fired up pretty quick, because that elitist attitude, it just doesn't fly with me, and so that's more on an EMS level. Is those relationships, the one that really is important to me as well, as in addition to patient care, is the fire aspect, and so one of the things that fuels that perfection in that specific area is the fact that what's in that 600 square foot house is all they have. They don't have a safety deposit box. They don't have storage units. They don't have any of that. Everything that they own and they cherish is in that house. And so when we go to a fire at that house and we do a good job, or we do a great job, and there's not one drop of excess water on that floor, or we cover everything before we pull ceiling, And we do a proper attic fire operation where we can take out all of our salvage covers at the end and they can live in that night. That's where the perfection comes into play, is because you're providing the highest level of care, because they don't have insurance. They don't, like, what is in there. And yes, you can't directly affect how those children are raised, or the life that they live. But you know what you can do is, when they're called for a reason, whether that be medical or fire, right, you give them A+ service, because to them that's the worst day of their life, and you want to make it a little less than that. And so that's I'm trying to paraphrase better, but that's kind of the theme of kind of how we do things there. And then it's predicated just by the sheer number of the times you do it. And to some people that's more than they care to do. And for me, it's just, it's now became, the way of doing business, as far as, like, I just want to do, the highest amount of calls, because it gives me the greatest opportunity to provide, provide for people the best that I can do. And so it's, I don't want it to come off as cocky or pompous, because that's not what I mean by that. My thing is it's like, you asked me what drives me, and that's what drives me, is it's the chase for perfection, to make it to where you go on the call and it goes perfect. You go on the next call, it goes perfect. And then that repetitive perfection, and then teaching other people to do it as well, and bringing them along for the ride, because it's a fun ride, and it's super rewarding when everything goes right every time. And it's an endless pursuit, because it never goes the same. It never goes perfect. So, but another thing that you had brought up was just like the general, city that we work in and all that stuff, and all the naysayers and everything like that. And you can go on forever about that. But the big thing for me is, we have, the busiest, what do they call it? The smallest amount of people in the busiest city in the country. And it's like, yeah, once again, above my pay grade. We could live in the negativity of all of that and what's wrong with the world and all that stuff. But I think if you stay in your lane, and your 3-foot circle, as they say, and you really start to understand, like, how you can make yourself better, how you can make the people around you better, whether it be, the hardest part is yourself that you need to work on, or the people at your station, the relationships on your shift or the other shift. And then just keep expanding that, because I think when it comes down to it, it's the people on either side of you, just like they say in the military, but it really is. It's the people around you. And when you go through your life and life happens, the marriages and the babies and the barbecues and the desert trips, river trips, mountain trips, whatever you're into. Those are the things that are lasting memories, for yourself, for your family, and for your kids, as well. And I think that's really what we need to get back to, is having that tribe, like you said. And then you go, okay, going forward, this all sounds great and nice and, hunky-dory, but, like, what are we going to do going forward? And I think the biggest thing that we can do is, like you said, is be honest, right? And have more people that speak out to their story, and not like we need 100 people telling stories about all the calls that go on. But what I mean by that is just the openness, to be honest with yourself, be honest with the people around you, and really be open to change. If you aren't, if you're not the person that's thriving right now and going through life like, man, everything is great, it's a perfect amount of work that I'm working, perfect amount of money in my bank account, my relationship with my significant other is great, or, you know, I'm slaying it on Tinder, or whatever floats your boat. Right. But you're really, truly, you know, winning in all aspects. Awesome. Share how you're doing it with your buddies. Right. But then also, if you're not, then be willing to change, because like we talked about at the beginning, there's too much information out there. There's too many things, and you can call them, you know, hocus pocus. You can call them, you know, the flavor of the week, or, you know, the latest snake oil and all that stuff. But this stuff really works, whether it's placebo or not. I don't really care. What I can tell you, and like the old timers always ask me about, you know, all the woo woo stuff I talk about, whether it's red light, whether it's cold plunge, whether it's the sauna, whether it's yoga, like all these different things. What do you call it? Grounding mats. They go, does this stuff really work? And I go, does it matter? I go, at the end of the day, does it really matter? I go, yes, I can show you science after science after science, research data that'll tell you it works. But I go, at the end of the day, if it makes me feel the way that I feel, then it's a win. Whether that's the money that I spent on it, whether that's the time alone that I sit in it, whatever it is, it's working. So, and that's kind of the, you know, the brass tacks answer that I give people, because it's like, you know, everybody wants to sell you everything nowadays, especially if it's as simple as including it in your feed and Instagram. But it's about what works, and if you find something that works, then share it with your friends. And if you're not thriving like that, then speak up. And really, you know, I challenge everyone to, you know, reach out to their buddies. And even if everything's going good, you know, you're not going to bug them. Like we got so entrenched in this, you know, separatist lifestyle of, oh, I don't want to bug them. They're probably busy. You know, yeah, they're busy. They're on their 7th episode on Netflix binge. Like they can hang out, right? They got nothing else going on. But really, you know, challenge yourself to set up those emotionally supportive relationships, and really just, you know, cultivate them, and really, because that is what gets you through all of this, whether you're talking about the job, whether you're talking about probation, whether you're talking about, you know, life in general. And you know, what got me off on this tangent is just talking about the city. Like, I mean, you can sit for 50 hours and talk about how crappy the city is. Shoot, I used to vacation to the downtown LA every year for the X Games. Like I mean, that tells you everything. And that was only like 15 years ago that I used to do that, and spend a week in downtown just hanging out, you know, going to the bars and museums, and it was awesome, you know. And so, but you go, well, where do we go from here? And that's where we go. Where we go is you know, you focus on each other, ourselves, our relationships, and then, you know, everything else will come with that. And it's about, you know, really focusing on people that, you know, are like you, that think like you, and even if they don't, and kind of going to your point about diverse hiring and personnel, you know, nothing, or, you know, some things don't beat when a person from my own first in, that's been my first in for, like I said, almost 19 years, goes through probation and then comes to the station, you know, and he got hired, and he works right down the street, or he grew up right down the street from the station. And that's pretty awesome, because like you say, they don't get out very much, because it is a broken system, and that's a whole nother conversation. But and so it does happen, right? And he's actually on the job right now. And then the crazier part of that story is the fact that he said that he remembers me responding when his dad had a heart attack, and I'm the one that took him to the hospital. So it's, no matter what you think about where you work or the people that you're going on, it makes a difference. And when you least expect it, there's somebody watching, and you could be influencing, you know, somebody to get out of that horrible situation. So that's one of the things that that I really come to respect is the fact that, as insignificant as you may feel, there's people watching you, just like you brought up, you know, the kids waving at you as you drive by. Like, you know, you're influencing a lot of people by what we do. And so take pride in that. because it makes a big impact that you may not see for many years if you ever see it at all, but it's out there.
Yeah, man. Dude, I think it's just, so all the practices, right? Everyone's always asking me, different questions about what I do, what helps me. And it changes. That's the biggest answer I can give. And people ask me too, like, well, what do you think is the answer to behavioral health? I was like, there's not one answer, so it's each individual and their individual self to make that choice for themselves if they want to change. And things are always in flux and they're always going to change. And that's why I don't just do a cold plunge. I do a cold plunge and a sauna here and there. I switch it up. I don't just always journal. It's going to always change based off how I ask myself those questions. What do I need right now? And I just stick to that intuitive sense with myself to know what I need, because no one's going to tell you what you need. And if someone does, you're going to resist it. So the biggest thing is like, there's a quote I like to follow, that 100 sayings is worth one doing. So like, just do your thing, and people are going to notice a difference, and you're going to ask you, hey, what are you doing? I don't get it, because you seem way more happier, way more lighter. You lost a lot of weight. What's going on? And it's just like changes to certain things like your diet or the way you adjust your life based off the day before or the day occurring as of right now. So, this podcast is based on giving so many different ways of how you can adjust your mental health. It might work for someone, it might not work for someone else. I mean, the last episode we had was a woman who's a medium, who does like Reiki on people. It's like, right. That's not going to work for 80% of the members in our department.
All you need is one, though. All you need is one.
Yeah.
That gets help from energy work. And to your point, you look at any successful, whether it be peer support, like, the best one I know of or I've seen is San Diego City Fire. But you look at all of those successful things, mental health, the one thing they all have going for them is messaging. And what it is getting as much information out as possible, because who am I to dictate what works for you or what, what's going to work for you? Or like, I'm no professional, but what I can do is I can be a conduit for messaging of, let me show you 1,000 different things. And then, I always go back to, you don't know what you don't know. And so, you're intuitive enough and have enough education on the subject to be like, hey, you know what? I'm a little up this week. I'm gonna go a little harder on journaling, or I got a really busy mind. I got too many windows open right now. Let me go ahead and shut a couple of these down by kind of processing them through journaling, right? Because you've practiced that. My thing is it's the messaging aspect of like telling them, everyone, all of them, and going, hey, whatever floats your boat, try one, try all of them. And the crazy thing that you find is when people have the courage to try new things, then it's fun to watch them come back to you and be like, dude, game changer, right? and it's always something interesting, yeah. Right? Because they always tweak it a little bit to fit their scheduling or whatever, and so it's just super cool to see. But that's going forward, that's the biggest thing is to it started with the PowerPoint of the foundation, and then now it's worked into basically the messaging aspect, getting people out there, getting people vocal about helping each other. And then obviously the future is right now looks pretty bright. I'd love to be an optimist on this, but of peer support going forward and getting better and more, having less fallouts, as they say, mistakes, and just being able to really kind of put back into people's thoughts that somebody does care, and it may be the first time in their life that somebody's reached out to them and told them that they care about them, and that's super humbling when that happens. I'll tell you that. But don't be afraid to. Don't be afraid or hesitant that you're going to do it wrong, because as long as you're genuine and truthful, then you're going to do it right.
Dude, being genuine and authentic is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself, because for me, I would always say, beware pretenders. Like, no one likes the teacher's pet, man. Like, just be yourself. And when someone can really show their truest self, that's what I love the best. And those are all my friends and the people I keep close to myself have that quality, because I learn from them. And they become like mentors to me in the end, because they teach me things of how to do that for myself as well. And I think the more genuine you can be, it shows so much more, because you can just grab onto that, and you can trust that person too. And the more genuine you can be it's going to spread, especially if you're in this line of work. If you're genuine and you can go to that person when something's going on and talk to them openly about something going on in your personal life, or what's going on in your thoughts, or how you feel about something. It's a quality that I think most people have in our line of work, and I think that's why people trust us to come into your home and do whatever, put all these patches on your chest and like take you down in some random ambulance to the hospital. There's a trust factor in that. And if you can live your life with yourself at home with that same quality, because some people forget how to do that at home, and I think people get exhausted for doing that at work, and then to bring that home, it causes more exhaustion. So I think that can cause a lot of turbulence when you're at home, because all you want to do is just chill and not do anything, because you're always in that place of having to do that. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely a balance and communication and transparency effort when you're at home to make sure everyone knows you got to decompress. I know that's one of the things we talked about, or you had talked about, we talked about before, just like decompress. You have to. I know I have to recharge, because I'm going to shut down if I don't do that. And so that's why you're going to have to find personally your own practices, or things that your qualities for yourself that you have to find to know yourself better, to recharge, to be able to perform at home, because you can't let your home just shatter, when you gotta, if your work life is, at this high point on a pedestal, I think home life is way more important. And I had a classmate who hated his dad, who was on the job, because he never saw him. And I just remember thinking to myself, I was like, I never want that for myself. And I just wanted to make sure I balance it, because it's hard. It's one of the most challenging things. What do you think what brought you to your breaking point the last few years, when you had to go through everything?
Wow, that's a loaded question. Just to speak on just one final moment before I get into that one, talking about being genuine, and a direct relation to that is how you learn on the job, right? So being genuine, when you go to that incident and you screw up, make sure that you tell everyone in your team, at your station, what have you, during the post-fire critique, of the mistakes that you made, because that sows seeds that go a long way past, I forgot the floor runner, or I forgot to grab the right ladder, or whatever the case may be. It sows seeds of trust, because you can be honest, and it starts there. So don't lie to yourself, but then also don't be fearful to exploit your mistakes, even on a fire ground, because it definitely starts to build that relationship to where you can get somebody to open up later on, if you've shown that you're trustworthy and genuine with the mistakes that you've made personally. So let me get the exact verbiage that you wanted right there. What led to what now?
Your breaking point, man.
My breaking point. Okay.
Well, obviously, your breaking point to where you are now on this different trajectory in your career towards focusing on peer support, showing others about, the the truth behind behavioral health, as far as this idea that was presented prior, like one page of, okay, suicide awareness and make sure you speak up, or, all that bullshit you wanted to cut through.
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing that's really led to, the odyssey that I'm on, because I speak to it as an odyssey simply for the fact that there's no clear end, because it's, the sky's the limit on this. But it really started with after I reached my breaking point at home, when it got real dark, and like I spoke to in the first podcast, there were habitual suicidal thoughts, and to where the complete detachment from home life, from my relationships, and then the fact that the resiliency kept it where I was able to come to work and still do my job. It wasn't with the brightness that I'd done it before, or that I do it now, because I'd kind of shut it all down and just went with brass tacks. And fortunately for me, it was, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, working in that busy environment, it kept the demons away when I was at work. But I was completely shut down. And so when the bottom finally fell out, and I started going to a clinician and really, opening up the skeleton's box, as it were, it wasn't, well, first off, I want to say it wasn't easy. Okay. It definitely gets harder before it gets better. And that's kind of with everything, whether you're going through divorce, whether you're going through a tough time with relationships, or your personal life, or personal self, I should say. It always gets harder at first, because you're learning things that are new. You're learning either, tools that you don't have, or things about yourself that aren't comfortable. And so it gets a lot harder. But if you take that resilience that allows you to do the job we do, and you put it into yourself, and ultimately the biggest thing that people do this job for is their family, and you really drive home the fact that you're doing it for them. If you don't want to do it for yourself at first, do it for them, and do it for the people beside you. And then it slowly creeps into where you start doing it for yourself, because that's ultimately the root of all the problems is yourself. But it takes a lot of therapy to get to that top of that mountain, because there's a lot of excuses that come into play, and that victim mentality of it's everyone else's fault, and it's not my fault. That so often is predicated everywhere. But to really know yourself, and I'm sure there's a philosopher somewhere that said this, but to truly know oneself is knowledge, and that's how it works. And this whole mental health thing is about knowing yourself, knowing your limitations, and being willing to take that risk to learn new things. And that's what I did. And I'm not, like I said, once again, I'm not being pompous or trying to tell you that I'm an amazing person and all that stuff, because I'm not. That's at all not what I'm doing. What I'm saying is it's possible. So if you're in a situation right now where you're just going in circles, you're having to use a fancy word, the cognitive distortions, right, where your brain's trying to protect itself, it's trying to lie to you about reaching out. Like, they're just going to make fun of me, my wife's not going to give a shit, I just won't say nothing, and then there's all these things throughout the day that keep giving you clues. And we don't need to talk about where those clues come from, but there's all these things throughout the day where you're like, man, I could say something right now. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And you keep counting yourself out. What I'm saying is, if that's you and you're listening to this podcast right now, do it. And if you need help doing it, call me and we'll figure it out. Because that's the true step in the right direction, is when you start believing in yourself again, and believing that you can do it. And because those cognitive distortions, that brain gets going and you start trying to protect yourself or what you perceive as yourself, and you start putting up walls, you start going away from the people that care about you, and you basically create this own hell that you live in, that the only thing that's left to do is to kill yourself, because you mean nothing to no one, right? And that can't be further from the truth, but that's something that will happen if you do, if you find yourself in that. And so that's really what led me to the solutions. And when my clinicians started rolling through these solutions, it was a light bulb moment where I was like, this is so simple. I don't understand how nobody has ever told me this stuff before. How nobody has laid it out very simply about, this is what we do, this is how we think, this is what traits are turned up to an 11 when you do these types of jobs, and these are the fallouts from that, and this is how you can help fix that. And so for me, going that low and being, for lack of better terms, saved by my family, the aha moment was finding out how simple it is to thrive, and how you've always been told your whole life that it's impossible. Nobody can be happy. We live in this misery. And anytime you're feeling happy and you want to feel miserable, you turn on your phone and then you get plenty of misery. Or like the other day, I was doing housework at a station and they had the radio on, just like normal, like, whatever channel. And it was like one bad news report after another. Like, and the way that the newscasters talk, and they're just so jovial, and they're talking about like, oh yeah, this guy was murdered in his car in Montclair, and next story, 2 people shot, and you're like, oh my goodness, and it just kind of struck me at the time, but I was just like, and so that's what I mean, is we're attuned, or we're coached or brainwashed, whatever word you want to use, into this misery, right? Because conspiracy theory will say that we're easier to control, but my thing is the fact that don't be, right? Don't be. Search out that happiness, because it's there. And no matter how far down the rabbit hole you are, how miserable your life is, how many times you've been divorced, how many bad things that have happened to you, right? Yes, it sucks. Yes, it's horrible, but there's a happiness out there for you somewhere. And there's ways to get there. And that's the most genuine thing I can say, is that I want that happiness just like I've found in my life. And I'm still working every day on it, because, I am not perfect. Chasing perfection in the fire service is a lot easier than chasing perfection at home. I can tell you that. There's definitely a lot more facets, and no SOGs, just in case you were wondering. But that being said, is there is happiness out there for everyone. You have to be willing to take that risk, and really, put yourself out there. And then once you do, this podcast is a perfect example, right? When I came into this podcast a year ago, I was, for lack of better terms, I was scared shitless. I'd never done anything like this before. I never pictured myself doing anything like this before. And I really didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know, right? And so I come into this podcast, not really expecting, to be able to, relate to a lot of the people that a podcast would talk to. I'm just some, old firefighter that's been doing it for too long, and bonked his head and went crazy and came back from it, and it's got this PowerPoint to tell you about how nuts he is, and that's about it. And what it's grown into over the course of just a year. is absolutely insane. I could never have imagined, where it's gone. And so obviously for this podcast, I've got to throw up huge props to you guys, because you got me to where I'm at right now, because of, giving me an opportunity to really challenge myself into basically something I wasn't comfortable doing. And since then, all of these things have transpired. So,
yeah, the only reason why I ask is because I think people like to hear from someone who's been through the darkest places themselves, because they know they're not alone. Mm-hmm. And for yourself to express and be open about it, it's very brave to do it. And I mean, this podcast has started because of my own inner struggles within, and working through it and seeing that there is light at the end of the tunnel. I have to say that being through hell and back has brought me to understand that I can honor myself more and respect myself more because I was able to get through it. Here's the thing though, you don't have to get there to feel it. But I think we have this place with ourselves. We want to be in pain all the time. Why? That's, for some reason, we lead ourselves there. And a lot of people get to the point of the bottom to realize they don't like it there anymore. And that's why they gather themselves up and they take the courage to take that leap of faith to get out of it. And for people who can get out of it, it's hard. It's not easy. But you learn a lot more about yourself and about other people, and you're a better person to be around. The fact that you've been able to get through it, and people want to listen to you because knowing that you were able to get through it yourself, and it's relatable, and people are more in tune to listen to that more than they are wanting to go to a psychologist. It's the truth. Mm-hmm. And people, I know for myself, I'm the same way. I've been through so many different therapists. I'm listening to this therapist and like, get me the fuck out of here. I don't want to be here. This person doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about. Mm-hmm. And it took me a while to even, long breaks where I even go to a therapist where, okay, I like this person because they're asking me certain questions that are important, and they're a good soundboard to where I can reflect off my life, and it's working. But it took me a long time to do that. Mm-hmm. So for even like suicide ideation, I went through my own suicidal thoughts, and I had to sit on my couch and be with myself. And those are the moments where it's the hardest, is when you're sitting by yourself. Mm-hmm. And I actually played with it. I challenged myself to do it more, to realize these are just lies. Mm-hmm. And it was a mentor, who told me, he's like, I would sit on my couch and I made a decision to not do that to myself anymore. I want to be in peace. And so I had to fight against it. And so it's hard because sometimes you have to let those thoughts pass and realize things will just come and go. And sometimes you have to say, hey, no, these are not my thoughts. Get out of my thoughts. And you have to take a stand for yourself. Mm-hmm. And I've been there, and it sucks. It's a struggle, but at the same time, it's led me to, be here to help people as well. It's like, I wouldn't have the tools that I have now, to help others. And it's not easy, but, now that I'm here and here with someone like you, who's been through it, it's just, it's really admirable. And I can't say that I would repeat it, but I am grateful, for those moments of myself, because it showed me my truth. And I think that's what we're really instilling here on this episode now, is the truth. Yeah. The truth is where it's at. And I think the number one thing you had mentioned too is like, be responsible for yourself. Take that responsibility to yourself. You owe it to yourself to be responsible for the people that rely on you and the people that respect you. It's a high responsibility to do it, but just be responsible with your decision making, with the way you choose everything in this life. And I think from what I've understood is follow the behavioral patterns, follow your own behavior, And if you follow the behavioral patterns, underlying that is a belief system that is supporting that. And if you can go into the belief system of what you truly believe, for what supported that behavioral pattern, whether it's stubbornness, whether it's an insecurity about something, whether it's a constant pattern, you're doing something that your wife shows you or your spouse shows you that you've never seen, there's something underneath that. So if you follow the behavioral patterns, you'll discover what's underneath, and ultimately leads down to your identity underneath those belief systems. And a lot of time those belief systems are limiting belief systems that has led you from childhood, from the way you were taught of what's right or wrong. And it goes down to the identity of who you are. And a lot of people don't get there. And that's where the truth is. So if you can do this work of what we call the great work of yourself and find your identity, that's where it's at. Because if you anchor in with your identity, you build those roots. When the wind and the storms come, it won't push the tree down because you've dug those roots really deep. A lot of people won't go there because it's hard and it hurts. It's painful to hear the truth about how you were raised, about how your parents talked to you and they gave you certain insecurities that led you to who you are now. It's hard, but it shows so much more in the quality of who you are and the character of how you stand in this life and the integrity of how you make everything whole of who you are. If you can get there, trust me, it's not easy. But if you could have a support system like a mentor is huge. I would have not gotten through my own darkest days if I had not had a mentor to show me the way. And usually it was people older than 45 in their 50s who taught me that stuff because they've made their own mistakes. And it was good to hear from them about the mistakes they made and how they were showing me through their own life how to navigate it. Because if you don't have a compass, how are you supposed to find true north?
Right.
But
yeah, and that really, when everything's swirling out of control and nothing really makes sense. I mean, it takes a pretty, I would say, both talented and grounded person to be like, have this inner journey. And a lot of people don't. I mean, I definitely did not have that capability because I, had a lot of skeletons in the closet or baggage, whatever you want to call it. And so that was what was so important to finding a clinician that worked for me, because I was definitely not the type of person that was going to go out and research, how to be happy, right? That just wasn't me. That's not who I was. It is now. I Google the hell out of that. But that being said, it was about finding a clinician that jived with me. And so like you bring up that point of, going to those people and you're sitting there like, what am I doing? This is not working. And what I want to urge people to do is to find the one that works for you. And really, they're trying to, really pigeonhole what it is to respond to first responders, and law enforcement agencies and military members, because it is a whole new ball of wax. But at the base level, it is similar as far as the upbringing stuff and kind of the MFT or the marriage family therapist side of things of digging out that luggage and finding out what makes you tick. And a lot of people are like, oh man, I just want to solve the problem at hand. But like for me, especially, the one thing that my MFT did was because I am such a problem solver, and most who do this job are, nothing was making sense, right? That was the whole thing is nothing starts to make sense, and you're just kind of a ship gone asunder because you can't make sense of anything. And when you start to, really dive into what makes you tick, that's when things start to make sense again. And then you can start solving problems on your own. You can start doing journaling. You can start, they teach you all of these things on a personal level, specifically for you, that can start, building up that routine that starts getting you in the right direction. But just like John said, like, this ain't easy. It is definitely not easy at the beginning, especially when when the clinician starts dumping your life on the table. and you really got to look at it, and you've been hiding it in the bottom of the closet underneath your dirty socks for 20, 30, 40 years, and then all of a sudden she throws it in the middle of the room and throws a spotlight on it, and you're like, whoa, this is too much, and so but that's part of the process, and realistically in a short amount of time you'd be amazed at the difference that you can make by finding the right clinician or the right mentor. And the thing is there's going to be setbacks along the way, because some scabs are bigger than others, some scars are bigger than others, and some haven't even become scars yet, and they're still got the Band-Aid on them, and so along with the mentor, along with the clinician, if that's the route you take, and this next part is kind of what I've kind of shifted into becoming, is that peer support member, right? And I'm not saying it's a specific department or what have you. What I mean is a peer, right? Somebody that can hold you accountable, not like well, I guess it would apply, but in the substance abuse kind of column, as a sponsor, right? But not going that far. But if you do have a problem, then 100% get a sponsor. But what I mean by this is in that journey of becoming better, whether you're, like I said, whether you're going through a divorce and that was the final straw, whether you had a family member die and that was the final straw for you, and you're starting on this journey of self-help, and going down this road, really confide in someone. Find someone to confide in that isn't your clinician, and it might be your wife, or your husband, but it might not be, because that might be a root of the problem, right? And so find someone that can be your sounding board, because there's going to be a lot of days that things don't make sense. There's going to be a lot of days that it seems like it's upside down. And the last thing you want to do when everything seems upside down is just like John said, is sit in your room by yourself and stare at the wall, and let those thoughts spin around in circles when you don't fully understand them yet, because that can cause a lot of problems too. And so, but just have somebody that you can confide in, and that you can bring along in your journey, and then don't be afraid to be somebody's sponsor too. You see somebody, one of your buddies, having a hard time, come alongside them, and it's as simple. I mean, I'm not talking, where you gotta be at their house every day, bringing them bottles of water. You can, if that's what's needed, but I mean, just the simple text, once or twice a week, a phone call, after their kids go to bed, going over their house, and just talking, and really humanizing this whole thing, kind of, the motto or the theme of the day, because that's what's important, is those personal, emotionally supportive relationships in all of this.
I'd like to end on that. Well said, man.
Thanks.
So if you can get in touch with Beau and his work, how do they get in touch with you, man?
Yeah, so I have my Instagram. It's Firefight Mentality. I put up all the stuff. You can find all the podcasts that I've done on there. You can find my PowerPoint on YouTube on there. And then I try to do Wellness Wednesdays and all that stuff. Anybody sends me anything that's been working for them, I try to throw something up on it. Like the latest one was hyperbaric chambers. Crazy the amount of research coming out right now of the help that can do. So you'll see that post on there. But and so you can DM me there, and it's that's the best way to get a hold of me, and I'll reach out and get back to you as soon as I can. And I try to keep everybody up on that. That's it.
Yeah, you mentioned Bud's Odyssey. I'm sorry, you mentioned hyperbaric chambers, but I was telling you about, if anyone lives near in the Southern California area, you're a firefighter, police officer, or a veteran, you can go to budsodysseyfoundation.com and reach out to them and let them know about anything with like PTS that you might have. because we're saying now that it's not PTSD, because that's not a disorder, it's an injury. So if you can go to budsodyssey.com and you visit them and you reach out to them, you can just email them, they'll get back to you right away. They have a program that is they'll put you through, and it's free if you're a firefighter, a police officer, or a veteran. It was primarily in place for someone who's had TBI, but they're looking more at PTS now. They put you through hyperbaric chamber therapy, and they do brain paint. So it helps. It's a phenomenal program, and I've gone through it myself, and I've learned so much about myself when I went through it, and it was free. So if you're in need of something, reach out to budsodyssey.com. It's a excellent program. And they even do like organic acid tests where you get to see like what's going on in your gut, and they give you the supplements you need after that for that. Crazy stuff. But I'm glad you mentioned hyperbaric chamber therapy stuff, because it's really, really good for you and for your physical body. And then they do the stuff for your mental body where you can go through a meditation process. They have you work through and learn how to transition from alpha to theta brainwave states. So it's pretty rad. But
yeah, it's huge for injuries too. I mean, it's all the the ailments, and then even fresh out of surgery. Like my pops right now just had shoulder surgery. He's doing hyperbaric. I got him. Yeah, I got him in on it because I got him half off, and so he was in once I got him half off. But been huge for inflammation and everything. But they're tracing it back. I mean, I threw up on the Instagram, 25, 30 things, everything from Crohn's disease to PTS to TBI to all the autoimmune stuff. I mean, basically any inflammation in the body, whether that's post-surgery or otherwise. I mean, it's absolutely incredible, some of the details that are coming out on it. And then the availability too. Like before, my sister went through a horrible sickness, infection that it wasn't available. This is just 3, 4, 5 years ago. And you had to get a prescription, and then now you're seeing where they're opening up these wellness centers with hyperbaric chamber, and then you can even buy one for your house, and it's not even that expensive. It's like $6,000, and I mean all things. I mean they're usually $150,000, and now you have a $6,000 model that you can have with an oxygen concentrator. You can sit in, Fountain of the Youth at your house. So, but yeah, it's definitely something cool. But I try to put those up on the Instagram. So if you have something that's working for you, send it to me, and I'll shoot it out.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for listening, and thanks, Beau, for coming on, brother.
Yeah, thank you.
So, just an effort from Frontline Behavioral Wellness, who is our sponsor and team member. If you have any issues, if you are a first responder, they want you to contact them. And their phone number is a hotline that's 24/7 available, and it's confidential. And if you have any questions about their treatment, or you need help, if you're in dire need, they are willing to help you. And I know some people who have actually done this, and their team will get you the help you need right away. And their number is 661-877-7241. And their program is seriously, it's geared and designed to help first responders and getting the help you need right away. And don't worry about the payment or anything like that. They know that everything costs money, but they want you to get the help you need. They take insurance. So it's like, if you're a first responder, you're already set. You have insurance. Don't worry about the cost, and it's confidential. So Frontline Behavioral Wellness is there to help out. So reach out to them, and thank you for listening.